It's day 5 of what will be the End Bad Governance protest. Now, there's confusion as to whether or not the protest is continuing in different parts of the country. Occupy Abuja has been trending on X, even as citizens have said that they will continue to protest. Omoyele Sowore has also, in conversations, urged that people return to the streets to protest, even as we've seen that the federal government has called for protesters to please cave into dialogue and cease protesting. These are some of the conversations we'll be having this morning on Breakfast Central, even as we head to X to share what Nigerians are saying. I'm Olive Emodi, and you're welcome to Breakfast Central.
And I am Osaogi Ogbawa. Pretty interesting summary of what the recent details are concerning the End Bad Governance protest. But also to mention that yesterday, President Bola Tinubu did address the nation in a speech that, of course, was broadcast nationwide. That speech did get many reactions from across the country, including from Professor Wole Soyinka, who, according to his statements, felt disappointed with the speech. Many others pretty much reacted the same way to the president's speech. And, I think it's a general consensus from many parts of the country that it was mostly disappointing. The president didn't address most of the demands from the protesters, barely even spoke about the lives that have been lost, more than a dozen lives that have been lost in the last few days. To the protests, and of course, once again was detailing some of the things that have been achieved by his government in the last 1 year, but that Nigerians are, pretty much familiar with. And so, many people, emphasize that there wasn't really anything new with what the president said, and it wasn't anything convincing either with what the president said compared to what the protest demands were. These are some of the things that we're going to be x-raying today amongst, other things concerning the End Bad Governance protest. But before we get into it, let's get Olive's reaction, first of all, to the president's speech yesterday.
I think I can see reason with what a lot of Nigerians are saying, that it felt like the president was disconnected from the plight of the everyday Nigerians. And from the arguments that I've seen as to why people would say that, it's because it did feel very, very scripted. Of course, it was scripted. As we all saw in, the scripts, even, that's another conversation, but it did feel very scripted. It didn't feel like it felt the pulse of the people. There were certain concerns. For example, the fact that people had complained about the fuel subsidy and the undue hardship, which is one of the demands of the protesters. The president, in a way, reiterated the fact that he did what he did and why he had to do it, in a way sort of saying that he's not going to make any compromises. It felt like that speech was more of reeling why his government has done a great job, as opposed to saying, okay, I understand where you're coming from, and these are the measures that we will take. It did not seem like a speech that, talked about compromise and the efforts that the government is making to compromise in terms of, okay, people are talking about the cost of bad governance. Whilst you say it's a global phenomenon, the hardship that Nigerians are facing, what moves are we making? Whilst Nigerians are tightening their belt, how is the government tightening its belt? Also, regarding the area of killings, the killings that had happened, the president expressed remorse as to the lives that were lost, but nothing was being said of the allegations of the police shooting directly at protesters. Nothing was said about a panel of inquiry maybe being set up, investigations being done, and the killers being brought to book. So exactly. It's really a heart-wrenching, it was a heart-wrenching speech according to most of Nigerians, and I can completely see why that would happen that way.
Very true, because it's one thing to acknowledge that more than a dozen Nigerian lives have been lost without going further to, question what, led to the loss of those lives. And as the president, that should be your concern. Every single Nigerian life should bother you. And if you hear that 12, 10, 15, 20, 30 lives have been taken, have been lost, it is very, very, almost cold-hearted to just mention it, that, sorry to those who have lost their lives, and then we move on from that. And that once again brings back the conversation about the value for the Nigerian life. So imagine if it was 70 people, imagine if it was 150 people, will the president's reaction be different? And if you would say that it will be different if it's 150 people, why is it not the same thing when it is 10 people? Why do 10 Nigerian lives not matter the same way
One
that
Nigerian life should matter?
Exactly. Why the same way 100 lives would matter, And so it truly felt, like you said, scripted, but of course it's always scripted, but it truly felt like the same way former President Muhammadu Buhari was given a speech to read after the EndSARS protest that many also condemned and said that it was mostly very tone deaf. And so it feels like, there is a step-by-step process, that the APC presidents have had to take when there is seeming, protest in their country. They wait out for a couple of days, hope that the protest will blow out, and if that doesn't happen, and it's looking like it's going to continue to, the protest is going to continue, then they are given a speech to read. A colleague of ours, Rufai, did ask that the president should do a media chat. Let us speak with Mr. President.
Absolutely.
Let us hear from you, on a live TV broadcast, what your plans are for Nigerians, and ask questions surrounding these things that the protesters have demanded. Almost none of the things that the protesters demanded were addressed in that speech.
It was just a speech that showed that they were on the defensive. It wasn't a speech that felt like, and in communication, you don't listen to respond. You listen first to understand. It shows that there really isn't any communication between the government and its citizens.
Well, again,
because the government is not listening to understand first before responding. It's almost like they're coming there to defend themselves as to why they are doing a great job so far, and protesters should return to their houses.
Exactly. And, and I think I like the way that you've put it. What he did is basically defend his concept of a great job that he must have done. He believes that they've done a great job. He believes that Nigerians should see the good things in the steps that the administration have taken. And, completely disregards the fact that you may have done these things, but that's not the problem. And that's not what Nigerians are crying about. The claims of, giving loans to farmers and student loans and fertilizers and, we're now, our debt, to revenue ratio is dropped from 97 to 64%. Those aren't reflecting on the lives of the average Nigerian, and that's what Nigerians are saying.
Before they decided to hit the streets. All of these were evident. It's not like there's anything new that Nigerians do not know from this. So if they knew all of this, and they went and still hit the streets, it must mean that there is more, that there is, they're not comfortable. Someone asked, who is the leader of the protest? And in one of the viral clips I saw, he said the leader of the protest is the faces of hunger on the everyday Nigerian. So if they knew all of this and it's not translating to their everyday life, people can't eat, people can't pay rent. I recently just paid rent, and it's the most ridiculous thing to pay rent in Lagos right now. So if everybody is complaining about the quality of life, it must mean that whatever you're doing at the top is not translating to the bottom.
And one thing that I'm going to point out, we're going to share our top stories for today in a bit. One thing I'm going to point out is the fact that the complaining is not limited to just those in opposition. It is not limited to those who didn't vote for the current administration, including the people who even voted for the current administration are complaining as well. And that's why you found how, it seemed like it was difficult to get people to counter protest, which is the regular, a mode of operation of the Nigerian government in the last couple of years, which is when there's protest for something, that you just suddenly see a new group counter protesting. But it was so hard to get people to counter protest in this time, including the 8 million people that voted for the current administration.
Even the people that came to counter protest came and folded.
A lot of them,
because at the end of the day,
a lot of them claim to have been paid.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that, the fact that it's not necessarily a thing of the opposition, because we've seen a number of governors in different parts of the country, a number of leaders making it a thing of politics. Can you please stop it? Nigerians are hungry, and it's not a time to joke about the reality of what Nigerians are dealing with. The governor of Bayelsa said the protests were being spearheaded by the opposition, those who didn't win the elections. We've heard it as well on the federal level. They said the protest is being sponsored by those who did not win the 2023 elections, obviously inferring Peter Obi and maybe Atiku, although he clearly did call out Peter Obi and the obedience. All that semantics is just really rubbish. Come out, address the plight of the Nigerian people. Talk about what you're doing. How are you cutting the cost of governance? How exactly can Nigerians see that if we're tightening our belt, you are also tightening your belt? Tightening belt is not, shouldn't be limited to the gender. It's not to the citizens. It's not about the citizenry. Everybody should be seen to be tightening their belt.
And it really, once again, just shows a complete disconnect or disregard for what the people are dealing with. If we still are hearing, or seeing the same tricks or semantics that are being played in 2024 that have, those tricks died in 1997. When you hear that there's a large number of people protesting hunger, and then you say it's the opposition that is sponsoring it, or you create some narrative, as to why, there's a protest. Those tricks died at least in 1996, 1997. Nobody believes all those things anymore. And so if in 2024, we're still hearing these same tricks being played by people in political position, is disappointing.
And I'm hoping that we can get an answer to Amnesty International reports, even though we've already started to see the debunking happening. They're saying that it's not really a reality, or it's not the true position, is not what Amnesty International has provided, which is not it's not unexpected to see that these reports will be debunked. But we'll look more into the conversations this morning. I would like you to share your thoughts with us on X at News Central TV, or you can tweet at us directly, and we would also be glad to take your tweets on television. For now, let's share with you what our top stories are. President Tinubu addresses End Bad Governance protesters. And that address did garner a lot of reactions, many not in support of it.
And of course, in reaction, Nigerians kick against President Tinubu's protest address.
Away from that, still talking about the protest, Umar Aminu commends Southeast for shunning protest.
This morning, we're also sharing with you what Nigerians are saying, very likely related to the End Bad Governance protest.
And we'll also be looking through the front pages of the newspapers where you get to be a part of the conversations this morning. Stay with us on Breakfast Central.
We begin breakfast headlines in Nigeria, where Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka has said that President Bola Tinubu's nationwide address on Sunday failed to address the attacks on the End Bad Governance protesters by security agencies. Professor Wole Soyinka made the observation in a statement on Sunday following President Tinubu's address to the nation. Soyinka said in listening to the address, his major concern was the continuing failure of government in protest management. He condemned the use of tear gas and live bullets by security forces, saying such entrenches a seemingly unbreakable cycle of resentment and reprisals. And in the same vein, human rights lawyer Femi Falana has called on President Bola Tinubu to address the demands of the peaceful protesters. In a statement on Sunday, Falana said the presidential speech delivered yesterday morning fell short of addressing the key demands of the protesters: the reversal of the policy of withdrawal of fuel subsidy. Falana demanded the immediate and unconditional release of all protesters that were arrested and detained, saying they had not committed any criminal offense. Falana also condemned the repression of the peaceful protesters while commiserating with all those who lost loved ones in the protest. And similarly, the Nigerian Union of Journalists has condemned the intimidation and harassment of reporters covering the countrywide demonstrations with the hashtag #EndBadGovernanceNigeria. The union stated that these acts were carried out by both state and non-state actors. In a statement by Achike Chude made available on Sunday, August 4th, 2024, by the NUJ's National Secretary. And away from the protest update, gunmen have reportedly killed the President General of Umucheke Okwe Autonomous Community, Onuimo local government area of Imo State, Chief Hyginus Orazurike. They also killed 6 other leaders of the community. A source in the community who pleaded anonymity said the community leaders were having a meeting at the President General's shop when the attackers came. According to him, the gunmen who stormed the area in a vehicle shot the 7 persons in the meeting and set the place ablaze. That story there. Now, outside Nigeria, the head of Niger's military-run government has accused France of wanting to destabilize the country. The allegation is coming 7 months after driving out French soldiers engaged in the fight against terrorism. Since seizing power on July 26 last year, the new government, led by General Abdurrahmane Tiani, former head of the Presidential Guard, has reset its international partnerships. And South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa said the ANC was fully aware of the risks and opportunities that lie ahead with the government of unity. Despite concerns about its stability, Ramaphosa said the government of national unity would be able to advance the interests of South Africans. He said the ANC would now also turn its focus on the party's future and how it can better itself. And that's all on Breakfast Headlines. And we'll go back to Breakfast Central. Now, I am Musao Gyogbon. But before that, Olive?
Yeah, I found it very interesting to... I thought maybe we should speak a little bit about the updates in Kano regarding the waving of the flags, the Russian flags that we saw. Now, there are 2 angles to it. One, it could be that the protesters are not aware of what they're doing, and basically because of the Sahelian influence and the proximity, the porosity of our borders, we've seen a number of people coming into Kano. There's been a mix of people from other Sahelian states. And it could be that they're not quite aware of what they're doing. But also, is there a possibility that Russia does have some form of a hand? We've seen the growing influence of Russia in West Africa, especially in coups that have happened in different parts of West Africa. So is there a possibility that they're involved? And what might this mean for our country in the nearest future? I think these are some areas to think about.
I don't think it's an area to think about at all.
Why?
I think the first part that you mentioned, the influence of the Sahelian regions, yes, absolutely. I don't think it has anything to do with
Now, yes.
I don't think it has anything to do with, a foreign government's influence. Why don't we have flags in Lagos and in Rivers and in Edo? So it's really just ignorance from these people in those who are in the streets of northern Nigeria that have been influenced by the protests and the uprisings in the Sahelian region. That's mostly what it is.
And do you think that
I don't think that they understand.
Do you think that it's going to spread, maybe?
No, it absolutely will not. Right. That is, once again, the influence of the crisis that happened in the Sahelian region, in Francophone Africa and some of all the other places that have seen Russian mercenaries involved in those uprisings. It has nothing to do with the end bad governance protest.
So then it highlights the fact that we do have porous borders.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we've talked about it over and over again. Then it also further highlights the fact that education is also a challenge because a number of them are not quite aware of what they're doing. When there's a protest, it just seems like, they will jump on whatever.
I don't think anybody's surprised, and if you look at what the reality is for many of the states in northern Nigeria, none of these surprises anybody. I don't think anybody who saw that, saw it and was shocked that, oh, this could happen, mostly because of some of the things that you've also pointed out. But, it's one of the things that we will, look deeper into today as, of course, we break down the issues over the weekend at the end bad governance protest. Stay with us. Let's go back to Breakfast Central.
Several rights activists in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, have vowed to go on with the End Bad Governance protests, which have rocked the nation in the last 4 days. Some of them spoke to newsmen in Abuja, saying, despite much anticipation over the presidential broadcast to citizens, President Bola Tinubu failed to address concerns which sparked the protests. Idong Joseph completes this report.
After 3 days of demonstrations across the country, the much-awaited presidential address to the nation was finally delivered. While President Bola Tinubu's national broadcast to the nation was expected to address the growing concerns of the protesters, some rights activists say that the president showed no empathy in his broadcast. They say that the policies and programs highlighted by the president in his speech continue to favor the nation's political elites without due regard for the poor and vulnerable.
The claim by President Tinubu that our protests are driven by a political agenda to tear Nigeria apart is nothing but an attempt to call a dog a bad name so that it can be harmed. It is a gross misrepresentation of the obvious facts and has become the economic reality of all Nigerians. These protests have been largely faceless and leaderless.
To further confirm that President Tinubu's disconnection from the masses borders on psychopathy, the president started reading out economic figures in the typical neoliberal attitude that prioritizes some abstract economic growth over the immediate welfare needs of the people. This is the typical attitude of Nigerian leaders in the past, which our generation is rejecting, that you will not read out economic figures to us while not connecting it to our present immediate needs.
Some of them also raised alarm over the continuous harassment by security operatives, describing the situation as unfortunate.
The president has tried to make us look like we are the violent ones. But every day since we've been organizing, the violence has been incited by the Nigerian police, the DSS, the soldiers, and the civil defense. And we are saying that as Nigerians, we should not have to beg, we should not have to explain ourselves before we express our right to protest.
People complain about looters, those who came to disrupt the protests. These are products of this establishment. Because as long as you keep having poor people around you, then even you are not safe. An average hungry man is a potential criminal.
We are not afraid of bullets. We are not afraid of tear gas. We are afraid of life without purpose. A life without hope, and that is what our leaders have given us.
They described the president's speech as a disappointment to their expectations, and called on citizens to come out en masse to continue the protests. In Abuja for News Central, I am Idonk Joseph.
Now, it is day 5 of the nationwide protests in Nigeria. Would we see fewer Nigerians take to the streets? President Bola Tinubu, in his national address yesterday, urged Nigerian youth to halt the ongoing nationwide protests. The president's address attempts to balance acknowledging the citizens' concerns with defending his administration's action so far. He defended his controversial economic policies, including removing the petrol subsidies and, of course, the abolition of multiple foreign exchange systems, framing these as necessary to tackle long-standing issues, despite many Nigerians facing immediate hardship.
After his speech, we saw fewer citizens take to the streets on Sunday. In states like Jos, Osun, and Edo, protesters have made several demands, which include a return of fuel subsidies, improvements in living standards, cuts in the cost of governance, reduction in electricity tariffs, and solutions to escalating insecurity, among others. Joining us is the national coordinator of the Take It Back movement, Sanyo-Olu Juwon. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. All right, thank you.
Good morning.
All right. We also have joining us this morning the deputy spokesperson to former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, Olusola Sani. Thank you very much for your time with us. All right.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the conversation, gentlemen. I'll begin with you, Mr. Sani. The president's speech, talk to us about what your thoughts are regarding the president's speech. We've seen widespread criticism about the speech being disconnected from the reality of the everyday Nigerian. Was there any maybe ray of hope or light in that speech?
Yeah, good morning, Nigerians. To answer that question, I think we need to go a bit into the history of this protest itself. This is one protest that the organizers of it have been very generous to the government by the way of putting it up a month or so before the due course of the protest began. And you would expect that once that is done, that literally gives a window for the government to engage this the Nigerians who are behind this protest. But rather than do that, what we saw is a pattern in which government officials, from one minister to the Senate president, talking down on these protesters. And then that naturally made an appeal for the president himself to come out to address the nation and douse the tension. But unfortunately, what President Bola Tinubu did yesterday was to add oxygen to the fire, because his speech did nothing but amplify the anger of Nigerians. He spoke to illusions. He didn't speak to the realities of the hungry Nigerian. He didn't speak to the reality of people who daily are facing uncertain life. Whether you wake up to see if we're killed today or not, you don't know. And then the president there's a crisis, and the president had to come up to talk to the nation. And what he did was what we saw yesterday. I call that a huge disappointment. A huge disappointment. And it represents this dysfunctionality in their system. Thank you.
Let's also, have a similar question to Sanyo-Olu Juwon. I mean, many people had asked that the president speak to Nigerians, even in the weeks leading to the protest. Eventually, of course, it took about 3 days before he eventually did. Were you expecting anything different from what we heard yesterday morning? And, are you impressed with what, of course, Mr. President delivered in his speech?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm obviously not impressed, and a majority of Nigerians are not impressed. The president's speech yesterday were simply many words without saying nothing. That's exactly what the president did with his speech yesterday. And some of them are quite shocking, yet not surprising. For instance, he made claims about what his government has done over the past 1 year since it got to office. Reading out various statistics that practically did not connect to the life of the average citizen. And one of his achievements, according to him, was the removal of fuel subsidy. And like I said earlier, if the removal of fuel subsidy was such a good idea, I think it would have been better for President Tinubu and all members of National Assembly, every member of government, to stop purchasing fuel with taxpayers' money. They should start buying that fuel from their own from their pockets. If 70,000 naira minimum wage was such a smart idea, the president and the rest of the National Assembly, including the rest of his government, should place themselves on such slave wages. So the point here is that President Tinubu and his entire cabinet are completely disconnected from the life of the Nigerian people. They are completely disconnected from the realities that Nigerian people faces every day. They don't buy anything with their money. They don't purchase electricity with their money. They live off the Nigerian people. They live off the sweat and anguish of the Nigerian people. If the hike of electricity tariff is such a smart idea, President Tinubu should pay such hike from his personal pocket, and let's see if they will continue to make all of these outrageous and ridiculous policies that have made Nigeria even far worse than the poverty capital of the world.
Yeah, well, the president is known to be pretty wealthy. I'm not sure he would have a problem paying from his pocket, for a lot of things. But I mean, going further,
yeah, I think that was actually not the point. The point I'm driving at is that the government officials do not feel what the average person feels. So that's exactly the summary of what the point I've just made today. That every of the government official will continue to make these ridiculous policies, especially as it pertains to the slave wage. It is largely because they do not live the reality of the average Nigerian person. Yep. The 70K can hardly buy a bag of rice. So what would anybody do with that? If the president fails to address the question of subsidy removal that had practically plunged, that had been largely responsible for the space of inflation, the inflation we experienced today, over 40% food inflation. Nigerians cannot afford to purchase food in the market. Nigerians cannot afford even gari. This is a very bad statistics, and this is exactly at the achievement of the president over the past 1 year.
Right. Before we go back to Mr. Sani, I'm going to stay with you. I just want to confirm, you're with the Take It Back movement. So are you saying that none of the things that the president spoke about, the 9.1 trillion naira, government revenue, which of course we've seen in the first half of 2024, the, of course, reduction in percentage of revenue spent on debt servicing from 97 to 68%, the $5 billion amount of legitimate outstanding foreign exchange that has been cleared, the, of course, student loans, the 200 billion naira initial funding for Consumer Credit Corporation, none of those things are convincing enough to you and, of course, the rest of, those who are protesting?
These are just mere statistics. But what is the reality? The reality is that Nigerians are hungry. What is the outcome? The outcome is that thousands of young people are dropping out of school due to astronomical fee increment. The reality is also that many Nigerians cannot even afford to purchase the high electricity tariff. As a matter of fact, many small businesses are shutting down due to this some of these policies, especially the electricity tariff hike. Many public institutions, including universities, have come out to say they can't afford it. So it's many hospitals, even the number of hospitals, including government hospitals, that have begun rationing electricity just because the electricity tariff hike policies. People cannot afford the high cost of electricity, not even corporate entities. So this is exactly the reality. What the president had read out are mere statistics that perhaps only benefit himself and his cronies. But the reality is that Nigerians are worse off in the last 1 year. And there is also something I also picked up from the hypocritical disposition of the president when he was addressing Nigerians. It is the fact that the president made no single mention of or made no single acknowledgement of the demands of the protesters. He completely ignored it as if they never existed, and went on to blame protesters for the violence that were wreaked by the police across the country. It is I think it was the president's speech. It's rather than addressing the concerns of Nigerians, it was a blackmail against Nigerian people.
Let's go back to Mr. Asani to talk to us about the speech. You've highlighted, I think both of you are on the same page regarding how the president's speech came across, and that really has been the mindset that we've seen across board on social media. How better could they have delivered the speech? What were the key areas that you think they could have tweaked, or what key things could they have mentioned that would have made the speech significantly different and maybe more widely acceptable to Nigerians?
Okay, first off, if you look at the tone and texture of that speech, what it recalls is those speeches delivered by a military head of state in the past, when they talk down on the populace, and they, like this gentleman said, it's a complete disconnect between what happens in the villa of government and what happens in the streets of Nigeria. So that speech, by tone and texture, is off mark. Now, let's come back to the merit of why we are here. I mean, if that speech was to address the concerns of Nigerians and the arguments of the protesters, the major thing of the discontent now is that there is a high sense of perception that the cost of governance in Nigeria is bigger than the economic reality of an average Nigerian. So if you have that as the context of this conflict, of this crisis, you would expect that when the president wants to come to talk to that, you should make certain deliverables open to Nigerians and the protesters that will talk specifically to reducing the cost of governance. The president said yesterday about, like my colleague said, reading economic figures. He could have told us, for instance, that the aircraft that he wanted to buy or that he has bought, he would rescind that decision. Or that he will scrap the office of the first lady that has become a burden on the country. Or make any such pronouncement that the protesters and Nigerians can say, okay, this man too has put off some weight from his side. Or this is a bogus and laborious cabinet. He didn't do any of that. If you are on the street of Abuja, on every 500 meters or 1 kilometer, you will see one siren flying around you because of the oversized government that he has put in place. So those are the things that if he had done it, that speech will have had more credibility. And his failure to have done so only does one thing. It amplifies the argument that this president does not care about the interests and yearnings of average Nigerians.
Just quickly,
he's there for himself and his friends.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's a strong one. Does Atiku Abubakar support the protest?
Naturally, yes. Any right-thinking Nigerian will support the protest because the protest specifically seeks a better life for an average Nigerian. So every right-thinking Nigerian should support the protest.
Yeah, but I'm asking specifically about Atiku Abubakar. Does he support the protest? Is he, of course, maybe encouraging Nigerians to?
Yes.
And what would you say, for those who say that, opposition, members are the ones sponsoring the protest, and maybe accuse Atiku Abubakar of being one of the sponsors of the protest?
You see, when you talk like that, then you are a communicator. When you talk like that in a situation like this, then what you are doing is what they call reverse cycle. Because that particular line of argument, one, is an insult to every Nigerian who is a body of this protest. Two, is that it does the government no good. Because when you come up with that kind of argument, you have eliminated any possibility of your sincerity and credibility on this matter. Does the opposition need to tell Nigerians that there is food inflation? Does the opposition need to tell Nigerians that this president is there for himself and his family and his friends? I mean, these are facts that are very obvious and clear to everyone. The opposition did not, a lot of the policies that led us to this point are solely on the neck of the Tinubu administration. He has no one, absolutely no one to blame for it. He led himself to this point and his cabinet. So the idea of saying opposition sponsor this sponsor is that is a foul path in crisis communication.
All right.
And I think they should desist from that. I think they want to move forward.
Yeah. Lastly, to Mr. Juwon, before we go, you are with the Take It Back movement. Will the protest continue? Are you encouraging protesters to, of course, stay in the streets?
Yeah, protest continues. As a matter of fact, as I speak with you, people are already converging in all parts of the country, including Ojota in Lagos, Abuja, Edo States, Delta. Across the country, people are converging because, as I said earlier, the president's speech did nothing to address the demands of protesters, so protest continues.
Okay. Anyway, we'll see how things turn out. Thank you both for joining us this morning. To the National Coordinator of Take It Back Movement, Sonyolu Juwon, and also a spokesperson to former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. Thank you very much for your time. We, of course, would like to reconnect with you both again as things develop. Thanks for joining us once again. All right, of course, the big question is, what happens after day 10? Because protests are scheduled to run for 10 days. So what happens after the 10-day period? And President Bola Tinubu still hasn't made any moves or taken any steps to address the actual concerns of the protesters. Do they go home or do they continue? And of course, the influence of many factors in the protests that we've seen in the last couple of days. We'll be exploring those as we go on this morning. Stay with us this morning here on Breakfast Central. Welcome back. News Central's comprehensive coverage of the End Bad Governance protests reveals that protests have taken place in many states in the northern region of the country, while many southeastern states shunned the protest. The Federal Capital Territory FCT, Kano, Borno, Yobe, and Nasarawa were among the states where protests turned violent, with reports of police deploying tear gas and live gunshot rounds to disperse protesters who came out in their numbers.
Compared to the northern turnout, SBM Intelligence reports that there were no protests in states like Abia, Imo, Anambra on day one of the protest and records of same day on subsequent days. SBM Intelligence suggests that there is a significant fear that Igbo involvement in protests could be misinterpreted as rebellion, or their activism could be labeled as an attempt to overthrow the government or make it uncomfortable. This comes amidst calls for the government to address recent marginalization against the Igbos stemming from a tweet by the Lagos PDA on X calling for a protest to evict the Igbos from southwest states. Now, you look at the tweet, that was the initial tweet. It said, Lagosians and every southwest stakeholders should prepare for the massive protest of Igbo must go on the 20th and 30th of August. They have 1 month from now to leave and relocate their businesses. It says from all southwest states, it says, we all urge all Yorubas living in the southeast to return home. Now, just to mention that the Lagos state government has dissociated itself from this tweet, and a number of Nigerians have dissociated themselves from that tweet and sort of criticized it, even though some people have shown some measure of support. But talking about it this morning, we have joining us lawyer and public affairs analyst from Birnin Kebbi, Umar Aminu Kalgo. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. My pleasure.
All right.
To be here.
Now, let's talk about, the lack of involvement on the part of the Igbos in this protest, even though we can clearly talk about the fact that the effect or the result of this, the cause of this protest is an underlying factor that affects all Nigerians, including the Igbos. Part of SBM Intelligence reports state that the reason why they're not a part of the protest is because they have fears of their actions being misinterpreted as an attempt to topple the current administration. So talk to us about your thoughts regarding Igbo non-participation in the protest, and then after that we can get into the conversation about marginalization.
I think the non-participation in the protest from the southeast states is very clear because the Ohanese and Igbo, the social cultural group that is most influential in that part has been consistent on the issue of this protest even before it began. It calls on all people of that area, particularly those of the extraction of the Igbo tribe, not to participate in the protest. And they call and lay foundation as to their call due to what they refer to as the past experience of such riots and the loss of property and lives that was involved. So I could say it had been a consistent call that they should not join, and this call was heeded too, as we can see in practical terms. That I think the only geographical region where there were no protests was in the southeast, and so this is the background as to the reason why there was no protest in that region. By and large, is the influence of the Ohanese on their calls. And this time, the youth have rallied and followed what their elders have said in that region. So this is what practically have translated to the lack of participation on that part. Though there are a lot of political insinuations also by some commentators that that region, as we know, during the politicking time, have not voted for the government, and so they are allowing the people who even voted for the government to protest against the government that they brought. But whatever, I would say, whichever way you see it, it comes down to the heat by the call and influence of Ohanese in Igbo.
All right. I'm sure, I mean, there's been one moment or the other where Ohanese, has tried to cajole members from the southeast, and they have not necessarily, taken their advice. So it may not necessarily be Ohanese and Igbo's advice, that is working out here. But we'll get back to it. I want us to speak with Umar Kirawa, who's our reporter who's joining us, and then we'll come back to you, Mr. Kalgo. Umar, good morning.
Very good morning to you all.
All right, just confirm your location and what the situation is over there.
Yes, I am in Maiduguri, the Borno state capital, and the situation is that of calm, cool, and peace.
Okay, I mean, is this the way it's been in the last few days, or is, this Monday morning different?
Well, this Monday morning is different with regard to 1st August, which is the first day of the nationwide protest. The first day of August witnessed a very rowdy and, of course, but young people stormed major streets to protest, to join their counterparts across the country in protest with what they called bad governance. However, taking into consideration the years of insurgency which Borno State and other communities and the Lake Chad went through, the state government and, of course, stakeholders, even non-indigenous, have advocated for non-participation even before the day came, taking into consideration the years of insurgency and how people are recovering, struggling to survive and a means of survival. So by and large, the day for us now here in Borno is peaceful as people go about their day-to-day activities in struggle to earn a means of survival.
Were any lives lost, in Maiduguri in the last few days?
Yes, we've had incidences of life lost, but for now, nobody can ascertain the number of life lost because there was restriction of vehicular movement, and nobody can give account unless the government will give account of number of lives lost in different locations within the metropolis.
All right. Can you talk to us about the security operatives and how they have conducted themselves? Because we've seen in different parts of the country, for example, in Abuja, where they've been accused of being perpetrators of the mayhem that's been, unleashed there. Is that also an allegation that we're hearing from Borno? How have they carried out themselves in all of this?
Well, honestly, with all sense of honesty to the security personnel, at the initial stage, it was a peaceful one, where they were even leading the protesters. But however, they led to some certain degree of movement where the security, they told the protesters to stop, so that they are skeptical about the situation where they have been suspecting maybe some unscrupulous element will join the protesters to cause mayhem, and then the protesters revolted to...
Umar, we're struggling with your audio. Seems that there's a slight disconnection. Maybe check your mouthpiece if you've covered it, and please go ahead. All right, please go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Better. Continue.
Yes, like I was saying, at the initial stage of the protests on 1st August 2024, it was a peaceful one where the security operatives were even leading the protesters to advocate for what they want from the government and what they need. However, they led to certain locations whereby the security personnel started restricting the protesters, so that they were skeptical. Some unscrupulous elements may join them and then cause mayhem, lead to destruction of properties, and of course, the protesters revolted, which led to the apply of force. Initially, they used persuasive means to advocate for the protesters not to reach certain level. But however, when that fails, the personnel have no any other option than to apply force. All right. They started deployment of tear gas and so on and so forth.
All right, Umar, we of course will reconnect with you again. Thank you very much for sharing with us live updates from Maiduguri this morning. Please stay safe, remember that. And now let's go back to our guest, a public affairs analyst in Birnin Kebbi, Umar Aminu Kalgo. I want your thoughts on the protests in northern Nigeria. There, seem to be reports of seeming more violence in the protests in northern Nigeria. Reports also of more casualties of the protests. So let's first of all get your reactions to how it turned out in northern Nigeria. Do they have more reasons to protest? Is it worrisome seeing how things turned out in the last 3-4 days?
Concerning this protest, I would say in the northern parts of Nigeria, it has been a violent protest, as you can see. And if you gauge the protest, I would say by and large in the north, it has not been successful, having been overtaken by violence. So that to the extent that we have a curfew in a lot of states in the northern part. We were looking at Plateau as being an exemplary protest, but things have turned around. This morning, I have seen headlines where in Plateau North, there was a curfew, also 24-hour curfew imposed. So looking at this country, if you are to take the North as an example with regarding to this protest, I would say the North have come out as a failed exercise, because the protest that followed, the looting and the violence that followed is unprecedented. If you look at you get this protest Most of the lives that were lost are within these northern states, especially in the northwest, and equally there are some casualties in the northeast as well. So the fears that were raised before these protests are that it may be overtaken by violence. So this turned out to be the case in the northern part of Nigeria.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't it? Aren't you bothered, with the reaction of the Nigerian police in these northern states?
You see, the situations are different pertaining to where I want to give an example at my state, Kebbi State. You see, in Kebbi State, the protest was begun peacefully. It was not that very large. And at one time, the protesters are trying to reach the government house when they were fired with tear gas. Yes, in Kebbi State, it is in Yauri, another town, where there was some looting. But the one that was happening here in the capital city, it was peaceful, but later tear gas was fired. Well, to my liking, I would have loved that the police behave more professionally in dealing with that crowd, which I see as not beyond them for them to manage. But that is not the case in other states. If you look at Kano, for example, the mayhem that was unleashed must be controlled. So the situation is different. And that's why the extent of what happened in Kano, you can see the NCC center, how it was looted. No, it's pathetic if you see what is happening in Kano. Even the culverts covering the drainages were broken to remove the roads that were in. So in such a situation, the police must try to contain that kind of situation. So I think by and large, there are areas where call for direct force to try and put the situation under control. But I would say I would have loved to see how these protests have gone in parts of Lagos where I saw it very controlled. So in Abuja too, I think it could be managed because of the civility that was there in the people that are protesting. So I will urge our police to be more professional in how they handle, and they should be commended in some their acts in certain parts of the country.
I mean, I maybe would agree that they should be commended in certain parts of the country, not very many, but generally, when we're talking about loss of lives like this, it should be something that should be completely condemned and investigated to know if, there was a legitimate reason why live ammunition needed to be fired in any part of the country, and the loss of every Nigerian life, regardless of whatever, reasons that are being pulled together. If you're saying that the NCC building being attacked warranted live rounds being fired at protesters, I'm sure a lot of people would not agree with that. Or the destruction of culverts, that they used to cover the gutters in Kano State. None of those demand or warrant the firing of live rounds at any protesters in any part of the world. Quickly speak on the emergence of Russian flags that we saw in parts of the protests in northern Nigeria. What does that mean, and where do you think that is coming from?
You see, any life that is lost is worth investigating, as you said. I'm just bringing the situation that is an unfortunate situation that you have lost of life. But mob action, whenever unleashed, is very hard to control. So I'm not saying that these things should not be investigated. With regards to the Russian flag that was seen, I have heard commentators talking about it, but I want to say that it calls for concern. It's not just a single Russian flag that you saw, but you see a group of children, and young men, all of them carrying the Russian flag. Yes, this should be an influence of what is happening in maybe the Niger and Mali situation. But bringing it here to this country, I think it is something that should raise concern, because those children that are carrying those flags, are not necessarily the ones sending the message, but they are just a conduit that was used to portray it. So I think our security agencies should have a close look at that incident. And I think also the government should look at it very well. Although I don't want to overblow it, I don't think it is anywhere to suggest things that had happened in Mali and Niger. No, not at all. The democracy we have in Nigeria is stronger, and the base for it is more firm than in the other countries. So I would like to say that it is an unfortunate incident to see such a thing, and we should not take it lightly or think that it is something that is just accidental without having any connotation. No, that cannot be. I think it is a deliberate attempt for some people that are behind to have engaged such children to carry such these flags to send a message.
All right. Interesting, that even that, the flags can readily be even found in those parts of the country, because I don't think you can just randomly find Russian flags available in Edo State or in any other, random state in the country. But thank you very much for joining us this morning, Umar Aminu Kalgo. We hope that we get to speak with you again.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, the conversations continue this morning on Breakfast Central. We're still extracting the little details surrounding the End Bad Governance protest, the reaction from the Nigerian presidency, and of course, what happens next. We, of course, will continue with these conversations right after this very short break. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Breakfast Central. We're reviewing the papers this morning to see what the big stories are saying, if they all are still speaking about the protest, or they've moved on to some other topics that they might find more interesting. Joining us to look at these stories this morning is Public Affairs Analyst Dotun Ojon. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
All right. Yeah. And let's see. I mean, right now, it feels like we're not quite sure if the protest is good. In Abuja, for example, Abuja has said that they are going on with the protest. Omonile Sowore has said that the protest should continue. Federal government has asked that the protest be halted. So it feels like we're not quite sure if the protest is going to hold today or not. On the way to work today, the road was busier than usual. On the first day of the protest, the road was scanty. So we're not quite sure. It's why I say I don't know if the papers, would all reflect the...
Bear in mind, we had Umaro Kirawa join us this morning from Maiduguri, and it says pretty calm.
Was calm. Yeah. So let's see what the papers are saying. We'll start with the Punch newspaper. On the front page of the Punch newspaper, the big story says, hunger protest. Okay, yeah, we're not quite over it. Tinubu's speech attracts knocks, kudos. Showing PDP slam president's address, NGO, others hail it. Protest organizers demand 1,150 detainees release. JAMB gives tertiary institutions ultimatum to disclose illegal admissions. NDLEA arrests 12 with drugs hidden in baby food tins. I saw that. Hardship, states get 570 billion naira grant. Retail investors may shun bank stocks as shareholders lose 1.6 trillion naira. Marketers stop fuel subsidy, queues resurface. Public debt may hit 130 trillion naira by December, according to a report. How we broke 20-year jinx to reach Olympics quarterfinal says, oh, our girls are really, really making us proud. I think they deserve a round of applause. I think that's the one thing that's giving Nigerians joy in this moment, the only thing that's about really giving us joy, to see how these girls are participating at the Olympics and how they've really, really made us proud. But that's all on the Punch newspaper. Let's head over to the next.
All right, Daily Independent newspapers right next. It says here, Tinubu draws flack after broadcast on End Bad Governance protest. Speech hollow. Failed to address hardship of Nigerians, says Atiku Abubakar. Devoid of answers to demands by traumatized youths, Michael Zekome. Speech didn't address crackdown on protesters, Wole Soyinka says. Investigate mass murder of peaceful protesters, Aburisha Day tells Tinubu. Nobody likes the speech, apparently.
The Daily Independent.
Yeah, this is still on the Daily Independent this morning. Protest, set up to Commonwealth. Hold federal government to account for attacks on journalists. We can also find here, JAMB uncovers discrepancies in 2024-2025 tertiary admissions. NDLEA intercepts drug consignments in baby food and tins and clothes to the UK and to the US. Grounded of Arik Air Fleet spells doom for aviation sector, says experts. I think final story we can take this morning. Enugu government approves 183 billion naira for 141 roads urban roads and 20 rural roads. Because of time, let's quickly bring in Dr. John this morning. First of all, your reaction to the speech, it was, you know, long awaited. I remember last week, you know, you had mentioned that the president must address Nigerians.
Yeah, and you know, that's also my core area, and that's my core area.
Communications.
Yes, I hold a master's in corporate communication with interest in political communication, and whenever anybody speaks, the first thing is to look at the intent. Yeah. What's the intent of the speech really? And you discover that the intention of the intent of the speech is not actually to provide solution. I don't want us to mix it up. The intent was to calm the community, and that's why you see that the president was saying, "Oh, at the end of the day, I want to engage with the leaders of the protesters." So the intent really is not to provide solution, and you will see that from the very beginning to the end, there's no specific solution as to the demands of the protester. And what's the demand of the protester? And I don't want us to confuse things this morning. There's a demand from the Showore angle of the protester. That's not the demand of the protester. The protesters just want hunger to end. That is the singular demand. Every other thing that you see is at best what I call Showore demand. And if all of us are coming together to say that, oh, there's an agreement to the fact that everybody in the community has been affected by the economy. So there's the need for us to actually, for the president to have actually made mention of it. Unfortunately, because most often when we come to the studio, we just say, oh, President Tinubu, because he's the president. You know, there's this principle of this philosophy, even in religion, of the kind of people that surround you. Philosophically, Jesus was talking to his disciples one day, and he asked them a very significant question. He said, who do people think I am? And they were trying to explain. And I said, you people that are with me, who do you think I am? It shows that the perception that people paint of you, people that are very close to you, people that are in your government, people that are your governors, people that are your ministers, the perception that they paint of you is what the community will accept. And by extension, the feedback they give to you is what you will work on. The governors have not been helping the Federal Republic of Nigeria because the governors happen to be the greatest beneficiaries of this hardship. Where did this hardship come from, if you may ask? It's from the removal of fuel subsidy. So if fuel subsidy has put people in a tight corner, I'm glad to also tell you that fuel subsidy has actually made, the removal of fuel subsidy has actually made your governors richer. But what did they do? They hoard the riches. In fact, there was an allegation that came out from a report that anytime they release FAC allocation, that the value of Naira drops, with the implication that there's this suspicion in town that whenever the state government have access to more money, some of them go to buy dollar from they mop up the dollar in the market. And as a result of that, there's pressure in our economy. So President Tinubu, the major good that he's been able to do is to give him more money to the governors. And unfortunately, these governors are actually mopping up this money. A governor in the Southwest, for example, 2 months ago took 11 billion. As we speak now, the contractors on the roads have all left. So the president didn't come across as somebody who was, the intent of the speech is actually not to provide solution. The intent is just to calm the community. Unfortunately, this is where disconnect and disagreement happen. When there's a disconnect between what the government is saying and what the people expect, there will be disagreement. The community was expecting solution profiling speech, but the president was giving a speech that is to calm the nerve of the people, thereby giving him an opportunity to invite them to the table.
We have a call from Lagos. We have Ayo calling. Good morning, Ayo. Please go ahead with your comment.
Hello. Yeah, good morning. Good morning to you all in the studio. I just want to pinpoint this out. You see, the federal government seems to understand that the students, as they see, it is not all about, I've been seeing so many things on the social media. It is not all about the airlines. It's not all about the people, the layman. But an average Nigerian has to be able to benefit from what is really going on in the country. We also what happened at the Kenya, the Gen Kenya district. their government was able to quickly understand what is really going on. At this point, we really need to understand something that the country, sorry, I will end up now. We really need to understand something that the country is at the verge of going into sabotage. If the federal government fails to understand the plea of the citizens, there's more future, there's future things to come up. There's future more protests to come up. Why can't they address this issue once and for all? And we should forget about this. The president has not said anything about this. People going to work, their lives are not even still safe because there's still an issue at the background still going on. And what I expect the NLC to do now is to call for a total breakdown. Let them resolve the issue once and for all, so that the lives of people will not be at stake. We are saying Lagos is peaceful. Lagos is peaceful.
Right.
You know what people still have at the back of their mind?
Thank you for joining.
Unfortunately, the only thing that government can do in the immediate is to make policy. You see, anything that moves from policy to project takes time. But here is the issue. The President Tinubu administration has pronounced a lot of policy, given a lot of policy statements that have not been followed up with. So when the citizens have got to a point now when they need urgent resort, it becomes a burden on government, because either we like it or whatever it is that we think. Projects that will better the life of the people cannot be done immediately, but policy that will make their life better can actually be enacted and pronounced immediately. But over the years, because government is always in the habit of introducing policies without following through, so the people, it has planted a huge mountain of disbelief in the heart of the people. So when the government now comes out to say, oh, we want to do this, the people no longer believe. For instance, one major issue that we have talked about is the cost of governance. And everybody is worried about it. In fact, at a point in this nation, the National Assembly alone was taking 25% of our national budget. So I think the cost of governance, and it's so painful that we have not been able to address the cost of governance. Let me tell you how government actually works forward and backward.
Okay, before you do that, I think we have a call from Elder David. Let's take his call. Good morning, Elder David. Thank you very much for calling. All right. Seems we've lost the call connection with Elder David. Please call back. I want to hear your thoughts.
So the Orosai report of, I think 2011 or 2012, actually suggested that, recommended that some of the agencies of government be merged. And we were on set some time ago when this issue came up. President Tinubu said, oh, I am going to implement this report because it's a way of cutting the cost of governance. As we speak now, the National Assembly has deliberated on creating Ministry of Southeast Development, Ministry of Southwest Development, all the development. And by the time you see all of these things, it points to one direction. It is actually to give more money to the politician, not necessarily to make life better for the Nigerian people.
All right. Is it also worrisome, seeing, first of all, the casualties from the protests? More than a dozen people reportedly killed. And of course, seeing the way things also turned out in northern Nigeria. Yeah.
So there are two reasons for that. First, the president actually mentioned it, and I think there was a bit of empathy when I studied the speech, which I quite appreciate. But again, we cannot wish people who didn't die in peace to rest in peace. We must, at the end of the day, what will be the benefit of all of this is for us to have been able to procure good governance through the protest. And I tell you that President Tinubu is the greatest beneficiary of this current protest. Because for the first time now, go read about the states. For the first time, states are coming out. In fact, it's about 6 states or so. Last week alone, paid bursary. 6 states, all gently, they started running from pillar to post. About 7 other states made some significant policies on agriculture just last week. So at the end of the day, as we speak this morning now, President Tinubu is the greatest beneficiary of the protest, in the sense that now for the first time, the governors are coming out to say, oh, the money that they've given to us, we want to expend it to better the life of people. We cannot actually continue at this level, whether anybody likes it or not.
Let's take this call from Port Harcourt. We have Daniel calling. Good morning, Daniel. Please go ahead with your comment.
Good morning. I'm calling from Bukata.
Yeah. Go ahead. Thanks for calling.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead. Thank you for calling.
Yeah. I just want to make a comment about the president's speech.
All right, please go ahead.
You know, your visitor dear, sorry, sir, good morning, everyone of you, good morning, and good morning, Nigeria. You see, you're saying that the president, when talking about the project will need some time to start and kickstart or whatever. And then we understand the fact that if you're talking about the project, it needs some time for it to be actualized. But Nigerians are not talking about those projects, rather. We are saying that since the president came on seat, the very first day I came on seat, he just said there is removal fuel subsidy with a word. And Nigerians are saying that let him use that same word, and then call off the fuel subsidy and whatever. And he can do it, and let's see that at least he has started from somewhere. Not to say the agenda that what they outlined, and then none of them has been addressed. And you are telling us that this is the project and whatever. You know, it can actually, if someone that wants to do something, he will start from those key points that the protesters outline. As he go through them and within his statement, within his speech, you will see that he have actually understand what the people are saying. You understand? But these things are not being aligned in his speech. So if he's saying that the project or whatever, or you come up with the
all right, Mr. Ojon, you've heard what he said, but I want to quickly touch on this because we're out of time. In reaction to what he has said, but then also to speak about the allegations of the police, actions, or the police playing a role in the killings that have happened in northern Nigeria. The police have debunked it. SP Josephine Ade, the police public relations officer, had come out to say that no police officer had acted in that manner, no police officer had killed any civilian, but there have been Nigerians who have posted videos alleging that the police was culpable in the action. So it's different reactions. We've seen Senator Ireti King-Igbe, who has also come out to clarify that the police was the one that instigated the violence that happened in the FCT.
Yes, I've repeatedly said it to you that my study of protests has shown that usually when crisis breaks out like this, apart from the backdoor crisis, and what I mean by the backdoor crisis are, there's protests in Ojota and some people are looting in K2 who are not part of the protest. Apart from that, any crisis that breaks out in the front of protest is usually as a result of either the response of police or another security agency, or the response of state-backed thugs. Usually you see them. In fact, in this protest in Lagos, you see police here, West Station. Then if you look downward, you will see maybe a bus or a car filled with some people that are not police, they are not security operative, they are just backed by the state to ensure to do whatever it is. So usually it is the response, and nobody will be, if we really want to be truthful, nobody will be able to come out to say, maybe police did not do anything. Because if the protester charges, or the protester, yes, deliberately, charges at the police, how does the police respond to the protester? So these are some of the issues. But quickly responding to what the last caller said, I totally understand the fact that what's it called? The community wants an urgent fix. But like I said the other time when I came on board, the major intent of the protester has actually been achieved, which is putting government on its toe. I think the president and everybody in his cabinet are just too relaxed with the reality of what is going on in the marketplace. But I know from now that we'll continue to see policies, we'll continue to see them put through with policies, and most especially, we expect that they concentrate on cutting the cost of governance so that there can be more money to develop the state.
I mean, time will tell, what steps will be taken. From the president's speech, it doesn't seem like the presidency is interested in actually making deliberate moves that address the direct concerns of the protesters. It seems like yesterday's speech was another opportunity to reel out the achievements without actually addressing what the concerns are. So I don't necessarily believe that we're going to see that there will be steps taken to reduce the cost of governance. I don't expect
I think
that
that
happen.
it should have been said
And
even in that speech there and then that, okay, these are the things we're doing to cut the cost of governance. We hear you, and whilst we're telling you to tighten your own belt, we are also going to tighten our belt in this way and that way.
And that's why I open with the fact that it's not a solution reading kind of speech. I don't know whosoever thought about writing that kind of speech. Yes, the intent is just, oh, let's say what we have done to calm the people and lure them to the table.
As if people don't know what has been done before to further.
Like I said earlier, it is the same way that the Nigerian government always acts. APC governments have always acted to protesters. It's never to address your concerns. It is, most of these speeches always seem like, okay, let's give them a speech and move on. It doesn't seem like, and one of the things that you said just now, that the protest, goals have been achieved, which is to keep them on their feet. If that was the way that it worked, that every 6 months you do a small protest, they're on their feet, but they never actually make any changes, any moves, I don't think any country would ever develop.
And I need to, this other part of the protest that I didn't touch is where he talked about people sponsoring and want to destabilize the nation. And the president is talking because of two things like that. First, he has the intelligence that I do not have. Second, he has the suspicion. And suspicion is very important because he knows that in time past, he has sponsored protests before. That according to what Shehu Sani said, that, oh, you are the grandfather of protesters, you have sponsored protests. So the president has sponsored protests against government before. So now he's sitting as the president and he's nursing the suspicion that, okay, because I've done this before, maybe that's why other people are doing it against me.
Dr. John, thank you so much for joining us. We, of course, will go on a break, and when we come back, it will be time for us to have Which Way Nigeria. Stay with us.
Good morning, everyone. Now, yesterday, we witnessed President Tinubu address the nation in what some hoped would be a reassuring speech aimed at calming the growing frustrations and anger of Nigerians. However, 24 hours later, as the dust settles, it is becoming increasingly clear that his words fell short. It was like pouring water in a basket, leaving Nigerians empty and dissatisfied. President Tinubu's speech didn't bring anything new to the table. It was a rehash of the same promises and platitudes that we've heard time and time again. There was no fresh insight, no words addressing the actual demands of those protesting, no proper acknowledgement of more than a dozen lives that have been taken, allegedly by the bullets of our own poorly trained policemen. It felt as though the president was simply delivering a speech for the sake of appearances, rather than genuinely addressing the heart of the matter. Nigerians are still grappling with real issues, Mr. President: economic hardship, security challenges, unemployment, and the lack of basic services. Nigerians can barely feed. A tuber of yam is as high as 10,000 naira. A bag of rice is almost 100,000 naira. Nigeria still has the highest number of poor people in the world. And the key economic decisions that this government made as they took over government has made it much worse. Now, it is my view that one of the main issues here is that Nigerians have very little faith or trust in this administration's ability to fix Nigeria. And that is one of the main reasons behind the calls for protest. Nigerians simply do not trust in Mr. President's words and promises anymore. And this is mostly because the first year plus of this government has seen those in government act in ways that have completely eroded whatever trust that there was prior to Inauguration Day. Right from the failure to address the issues around the 2023 election, which many people described as one of the worst in Nigeria's history, to the expanded cabinet of this government, creating even new ministries which Nigerians interpreted as the government trying to settle political favors. And also to the lack of clarity with the whole petrol subsidy saga. Are we still paying subsidy or not? Then to the use of billions of naira to buy cars for National Assembly members, renovating one house for the Vice President for 21 billion naira, the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway project, and the complete failure to convince Nigerians that that truly is a worthwhile project. Also, spending 90 billion naira on religious pilgrimage, and the Senate President, if you remember, sending prayers to fellow senators' emails. All of these things have been some of the biggest talking points of this administration. And it has led to further eroding of whatever trust there was from Nigerians, including those who voted the APC. Even those set of people don't trust your government anymore, Mr. President. Take a look at how much effort was put into gathering people to form the Say No to Protest groups. Some of those individuals claim to have been paid even to join those counter-protest groups. All the 8 million people plus who voted for Mr. President were nowhere to be found in the last few weeks to defend this government. And that should tell you that even those who supported the idea of a Bola Tinubu presidency seem to have lost faith in your government. They're equally hungry. They do not see any faith in persevering like you've asked Nigerians to. Now, they may be silent, so they do not publicly criticize your government, but still, they can't and won't be found defending it. All 8 million of them, according to INEC. You can't find them coming out in good faith to defend this administration. A handful needed to be paid peanuts to form counter-protests and ended up, of course, confusing themselves in the process, like we saw. I'll end by saying that this administration must do all possible to win back the trust of the Nigerian people by taking steps to show that they are truly listening to what Nigerians are saying. Good morning, Nigerians.
New Central TV.
As Nigeria faces widespread protest against poor governance, President Bola Tinubu, in his address to Nigerians, firmly rejects calls to reinstate fuel subsidies despite increasing pressure. In the last 4 days, citizens have demonstrated their frustration over economic hardships and perceived government failures. His speech, intended to quell unrest and outline his administration's effort, has received mixed reactions. President Tinubu acknowledged the turmoil and expressed sorrow for lives lost during the protests.
The president's speech comes after the Nigerian police, through its force public relations officer Muyiwa Adejobi, refuted a recent report published by Amnesty International, which claims that 13 individuals have lost their lives due to the protests in Nigeria that began on the 1st of August. Now, joining us is the chairman of the Chairman Lagos State African Democratic Congress, George Ashiru. We're also joined this morning, likely by the former Consul General of Nigeria in the United States, Ambassador Joe Keshi, OON. Good morning to you both, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having us.
All right. Mixed reactions to Mr. President's speech. Wole Soyinka, who of course used to be was maybe still one of the president's strongest supporters, came out yesterday to condemn, the speech and, pointed out ways that it fell short. I'm going to start with Mr. Ashiru this morning. Your thoughts on the speech? Do you also believe that it fell short? And what ways do you think that speech could have been better?
Thank you very much. Firstly, I want to be objective in saying that there were calls for the president to speak. I was one of those that was on your station severally to ask the president to speak. That's what a leader does. And he did speak. And so for that, we will say, well done. And to the extent that his speech may have assuaged some feelings in some quarters, again, we will say, well done. However, the content of the speech were basically political rhetoric. There were repetitions of it's not having necessary impact. And so not taking away from the fact that, yes, the government will be reactively taking measures to mitigate against some of the policies they took themselves. But the fact of the matter is that the people who went on the streets are reacting to the impact of those policies and to the fact that nothing was done or is being done that they can see is mitigating it, as I have said earlier. And so what should have happened is that the president should have given an inspirational speech, and then his ministers and governors should have gone and broken it down to the people. This is the direct impact of the actions that the government is going to take to help you to overcome this, overcome that. I mean, one of the key things people are looking for is a reversal of the subsidy, in the belief that once the subsidy is reversed, then the inflation, the runaway inflation will come down. I actually don't think that can be done. You see, the allocations that the state governments and the local governments are already receiving from the so-called savings from the subsidy is what they're hoping to use to pay minimum wage and the palliatives. So there will be a political problem for the president to try and go there. But then we also have to ask ourselves, is it true that we have subsidy? Because the landing cost of PMS in this country, now that we're importing everything, is about 1,000 naira plus. And we are paying 600 naira on average at NNPC stations. So who's paying for that extra? So we might actually be still paying this subsidy, maybe not as much as we were doing before. So really, unfortunately, on the streets, the people are not going to feel any impact, perhaps for the nearest future of the actions of government to try to pull back or reel back the impact of the policy announcements they made very hastily, I might say, the beginning of this administration. So to that effect, it was 1 for the president for making a speech and -2 for not giving a speech that will help the people move forward from the pains that they're suffering.
All right. I mean, that's a valid point you have there, because talking about the fuel subsidy, and if really the government is still, has completely stopped paying fuel subsidy, but we'll investigate that further. Let's bring in Ambassador now, and I'll have you react to the same question. Also looking at the image that Nigeria has painted to the international community, do you think that this speech has in any way changed whatever perception? I mean, what was the perception pre the speech and post the speech that Nigeria has sent to the international community?
Well, first, good morning, by the way. To your first question, I think Mr. George Ashiri, if I got his name correct, has said it all. Halfway through the speech, I became a little bit worried that this is not the kind of speech that should have been given at this point in time. It is still politics at its best, and it shows the lack of insensitivity. It shows the lack of understanding of the people's protest or complaint. It shows lack of compassion of the leadership. When you are in this kind of situation, what you need to do is to try and listen to the voices of your people. Try and understand what they are saying, and it's not the time to play politics. Unfortunately, we've been playing politics with this whole issue from day one. Look, the problem itself started from the very first, from day one, actually, not the day, after the election. In the euphoria of victory, the APC and the president-elect did not interrogate the nature of their victory. Instead, they were arrogant, they were not even conciliatory, they were not even prepared to mobilize the people to understand that there's election is over, that work needs to be done, and they just went ahead. If they had interrogated the nature of the victory that was given to them, they should have known that conventional wisdom in politics, and I'm a student of politics, conventional wisdom in politics dictates that if you have a narrow victory, very small victory, you don't immediately embark on a grand reform. You do it gradually, very gradual process. But they just went straight into it, and the consequence of the, pardon my language, the Cabrera attitude of the Lagos boy is what we are seeing today. Not only is it in the domestic arena, internationally also. Look at what happened to ECOWAS. Today, nobody is so sure of what ECOWAS looks like anymore. So in making such a speech, the president should have shown compassion. He should have shown that he was listening. He should have shown that he understood what the people are saying. But above all, he should have also done more explanation. For example, the people are complaining. I mean, part of the complaint that I heard from the street was that, look, even if we are paying subsidy, we also know that there's been a lot of corruption in the system. And that those responsible for the corruption who've been collecting money and trying to fix the refineries since, let me use a popular that my grandkids love when I say to them, since Adam was a boy, they've been collecting subs and they've been collecting money to repair all the refineries and giving us promises that have never been met. Is it not time, even if the president has said, look, I will look into this area of subsidy and the corruption, do some concession for goodness sake.
Yeah.
Was that done? Of course, none. But on the issue of what the international community, look, many years ago, Julius Nyerere did one when the IMF started and the World Bank started getting involved with Africa, that IMF policies bring people to the streets. This gentleman died many years ago, and exactly what they said is happening. The IMF, of course, will be happy that we're implementing all these reforms and so on, but my position is that it should have been gradual and every effort should have been made to carry the people along. And how do you do that? You should have explained to them the economy you inherited and why change is necessary.
Yeah, all right. Scary, you know, the IMF point that you've made, because it's actually really true. You know, almost every country that has needed IMF support, you know, has had almost the same reaction. It never actually helps you. It just keeps you in you know, continuous turmoil, economic turmoil for a lifetime. George Ashuri, I'm coming back to you now. Would you say that this, I mean, because the president had time, they had days, they had weeks to prepare a response, maybe before the protest started, but I mean, they eventually waited 3 days after. So is this the best that the Bola Ahmed Tinubu presidency could present to Nigerians? After all they are thinking, is this the best that they have? Or is it in some way just really trying to show you that they don't really regard the cries of Nigerian people, and so they couldn't bother themselves too much to do better?
Well, let me even lump the various tiers of government into this equation. Why is it only the president that has to speak? Yes, the policy implementation of the president's vision is what we're suffering from. But the partners in this policy design are state governors. They are the same people who will tell the president, we need this allocation, we need this allocation, you need to share this money, share this money, share this money. Now that all of that is happening, and the government has taken, you know, this liberal approach to raising taxes on the people, and the governors are getting a higher allocation, why are the governors not also explaining what they are doing to mitigate the impact of this implementation of these policies on the people? Why are the local governments not asked to explain more what they're doing with the allocations? Because one of the problems we have is that we forget that the federal government may be taking about half of the lion's share of all the federal income, but the rest that is being shared, the people are going to be impacted directly by the inactivity of their state government. This corruption we're talking about, it's corruption from the ward level, from the corruption at the council level, corruption at the local government level, corruption at the state level, that makes it difficult that when the government even says, we will release this amount of grains, release these palliatives. We saw what happened during COVID. All these things were packed inside some parties' personal headquarters and people's personal homes. So we have a top-down approach to government which does not help. We need to forget about trickle-down. It's no longer, you know, the way to govern. You have to think about the bottoms-up approach. And that is why the president is still speaking in a feudalistic manner, basically saying, this is it, take it the way I put it to you. Now, he has to start holding the governors responsible for saying that we saved money from subsidy. We release this amount of money to you. You should account to your people as well. You should tell them what you are doing with your money. I cannot protect you. I cannot take the bullets on your behalf. What are you about your local governments? What are they doing about healthcare? What are they doing feeding the people on the streets? and cleaning the street and ensuring that people are going to school. All of these things are not the responsibility of the presidency. So these are part of the things we're talking. So all of this, the three tiers of government are all collectively responsible for not taking care of the needs of the people.
Absolutely. Because we need to wrap up the conversation. Ambassador Kechi, 30 seconds, please. Quickly just chip in your last or your final thoughts on this matter.
All right. It seems that we're having challenges with the network. But we'll certainly want to have this conversation again as we need more time, and would hope that you grant us the audience when we come back to you. Thank you so much, Ambassador Joe Kechi, and thank you very much, Mr. Gbenga for joining us. We look forward to having you both again.
All right. And this is where we will be saying goodbye this morning. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a very interesting Monday. George Ashiru, thank you so much. Yes, yes. It's been a very interesting Monday. And of course, you know, like I asked, does the protest get up to 10 days? And if it gets to 10 days and the Tinubu administration still doesn't respond to the proper demands of the protesters, what next? These are some of the things that we're going to be extracting further this week. And of course, we continue to call for peace in every part of the country. If you still feel like you want to exercise your right to protest, please do it peacefully. Absolutely. I am Osaogie Ogbawa.
And I am Olive Emodi. Thank you to all our guests who joined us physically and virtually. The show continues with other shows, but we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day.